2 of section 5.6, inverses of functions. And what I didn't talk in the first part is that the inverse of a linear function were also functions. Now, if you remember, what I mean by a function is that if we were using the vertical line test, okay, so I'm going to draw it here in green, it would only pass through this blue graph one point. So that means, yes, it is a function. However, let's take a look here at the inverse, which is in red. If I use the vertical line test, it is not a function because it passes the graph in two different places. So let's start looking at inverses of non-linear functions. It's going to get a little complicated here. So I'm sorry. I also want you to pause the video and copy down the core concept that's coming up. So if you copy down the core concept, you now know that there is something that's called a horizontal line test for inverses. And looking at this graph, let's use that horizontal line test to see if its inverse is a function. Okay, so it is x squared. We know that this is a parabola, so I'm going to draw this as a parabola. And since it's a negative in the front, we know that it is an upside down parabola. So let's draw this here. If I can get my pen to work. Upside down parabola. Great. Now, using the horizontal line test, so I'll do that in a different color and then I'll erase it so that you can see. Horizontal line test is saying that it is not a function. It doesn't pass the horizontal line test, which means that its inverse is not a function. Okay, so this part is where it's going to get tricky. So we are only looking for the values that are all negative. So for this particular parabola, let me draw the axes so it makes a little bit more sense here. We are only looking at the positive, the negative values, excuse me. So we're going to ignore all of the positive values and we're only going to be looking at the negative values. So there's a little bit of a restriction on here. Okay, so let's get started. Find the inverse. Step 1, replace y and x. So now x equals negative y squared. Okay, so divide it by -1. And now we're going to square root it. And it comes out to be plus or minus the square root of negative x equals y. And some of you may be thinking you can't have a negative inside the radical, but let's take a look at it because it's going to make a little bit more sense, especially when we graph it. Before we graph this, we have to take a look at the restriction here. So this restriction here says that we are only looking for the negative values. We are not looking for any of the positive values. So that means this negative sign right here, I'm going to use my little eraser tool and we're just going to erase this because we do not need it. So that means we are only going to be graphing the negative part of this. So I plugged it into my graphing calculator and hopefully you learned how to put the restriction in. But something funny came out of mine. I'm trying to fix it. When I press graph, see the original function? I'm not too sure why I made the red line that way because it's not supposed to include that. But there's the inverse, the blue line, and the red line is the original function. Monitoring progress 8. Notice that there are no restrictions here, so let's just get going here. We are going to make sure that we replace this for y, so you know that's already happening. Negative x cubed plus 4. We're going to switch the x and y variables. Negative y cubed plus 4. We're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So x minus 4 equals negative y cubed. We're going to divide everything by -1, which changes the signs. Negative x plus 4 equals y cubed. Lastly, we're going to cube root everything. So cube root everything. And this becomes the cube root of negative x plus 4. So I now want you to pause the video, plug it into your calculator, and I want you to put in both. So put in the original function, which is here. This is the OG. And then I want you to put the inverse function, which is this one right here. Let me rewrite it again. Cube root of negative x plus 4. So here I have my original function, which is in blue, negative x cubed plus 4. My inverse, which is the cube root, you just press math to get to that cube root sign, and make sure to put parentheses for the inside here, don't forget that, is negative x plus 4. I am now going to press graph. Let's see what these look like. There's one of them. And there is the second one. And remember, if there was the line of reflection, which goes right across here, that is definitely, those are both inverses. Problem. And this one, we're going to go by pretty quickly. Let's switch it now. So x is going to equal the square root of y plus 2. We're going to square both sides to get that to pop out. So x squared equals y plus 2, subtract 2, x squared minus 2 equals y. So that is our inverse. Now this last one, I'm going to leave up to you to graph on your graphing calculator and make sure that it is symmetrical. Again, remember, oops, sorry for my graph, across the y equals x line.